Hello, I'm Claire Poole and welcome to the Climate of Sport podcast, the show in which you get the inside track on all things sport and sustainability globally. Join me every week where I'll be chatting to a special guest about news, opinion and insights on how sport is moving to a more environmentally friendly future or taking action on climate change. Hi everyone and welcome to the Climate of Sport podcast with today's special guest, Jeremy Casebeer, who I'm going to introduce right now. Hi Jeremy.
Hi Claire, thanks for having me on.
Good to see you. It's such a pleasure, such a pleasure. And I want to introduce you by using your LinkedIn bio if I may, because I think this is just brilliant. And then we're going to unpack some of this stuff. So in case people don't know who you are, which is crazy, pro athlete, impact strategist, host of Our Impact podcast, working to accelerate climate solutions and protect our oceans through sport and partnerships. I love that as a top line. So let's unpack it. Pro athlete, start off there. Talk to us about that.
Yes, I've played sports growing up my entire life. Started with soccer, found out I was a little too slow, a little too tall, had kids running circles around me, and tried playing volleyball and figured out I could actually play at the beach as well during the summers, and just loved it. And started playing freshman year of high school, so I was a little late to it, and then went on to play at UCLA, indoor there, and then was considering a proper desk job, something around sustainability or working with nonprofits when I graduated, and had the opportunity to continue playing beach volleyball and try playing on the AVP tour, see how that went. And yeah, the first 6 months I got to play on the AVP tour, got to play in Australia, New Zealand, and travel all over, and I was hooked.
Amazing. And still going strong. You're training for next season.
Yeah. I think I'm entering my 11th year, which is wild to say, but yeah, gearing up for a full season this year. The last 2 years have been modified because of COVID, but we're actually going to have double the number of events this year and get to go all over the US.
Oh, so good, isn't it? The coming out the other end of COVID, should we all say with our fingers crossed and bated breath. So that's the pro athlete piece. Talk to me about the impact strategist bit, because this is like the sustainability and the impact work that you're doing, isn't it?
Yeah. So I grew up in Santa Barbara, California, and basically was very fortunate to have the mountains and beach kind of my backyard. And grew up camping with my family. I always loved being outdoors. And in high school, I had an environmental science teacher that really brought the subject of climate change to life and painted in a really engaging yet accessible way. Got to go out to the Channel Islands off the coast of Santa Barbara and on a class field trip for a few days. Got to see what basically California looked like before it was developed, and went on to study sustainability at UCLA, and I've always wanted to work in sustainability and try and have an impact. But like I said, I put the desk job on delay when I graduated, and I've always been looking for a way to find a way to have an impact while I'm playing beach volleyball and get that kind of skill set and experience while I'm playing to make that transition when I'm eventually done as an athlete to work around sustainability in sport. So it's been a long process to kind of figure out how to connect the dots, but yeah, I'm starting to figure it out and really excited on a few projects. I'm working with the AVP Pro Tour and Waste Management, our friend Lee Spivak, who's a legend.
Shout out, Lee.
So working on the AVP's climate action plan, the first one in volleyball. And then in the last 2 years, I've been focusing on my sponsorships with third-party certified brands, so B Corp, 1% for the Planet, and climate neutral brands. And then a few who aren't, but are interested. So exposing them to different certifications, different ways that they can have an impact through their business, and then also storytelling around that. So creating videos and photos for the brands with some of my friends who are creatives. And that's been really, really fun because I'm a terrible artist. I feel like I'm not very creative as an athlete. That's kind of been my focus for the last 20 years or so. So it's been really cool. In the last few years, I got into photography myself, starting from scratch, but I have all these friends that are great creatives, so getting to work with them and the brands to figure out how to create some compelling pieces of content.
I love that. Bring the tribe with you on the journey. I love that. So there's loads I want to ask you about there in terms of the sort of athlete and the purpose piece and the sponsorship piece and stuff. So we'll get into that. But just to finish off your bio, host of Our Impact podcast. So I've been fortunate enough to chat with you on that. And I know it's going great. You've had so many amazing guests. So if anyone's listening to this, go over now, well, maybe at the end of the episode, and subscribe to Our Impact podcast. But tell us about who you're chatting to and what the sort of the focus of the podcast is.
Yeah. So basically, like I said, I've always been trying to figure out how I can learn and have an impact as an athlete while I'm playing, and eventually transition into a more traditional career. And I basically was focused on 3 questions. What is my impact? What can I do about it? And then how can I help scale positive outcomes and solutions? And that's basically the premise of the show. But as I started to talk to more and more people in the volleyball community, other athletes, and just friends and family, it seems like a lot of people have those same questions. People want to act. People want to kind of have a greater impact outside of their personal lives and see how they can be part of solutions. But it's really confusing on where to begin. So that's the premise of the show. What is our impact? What can we do about it? And how can we help scale positive outcomes and solutions? So I get to basically scratch my own itch, talk to a bunch of really interesting people like yourself. Been interviewing a number of founders of B Corps like Goyaki and Mir. So yeah, business leaders, athletes, nonprofit leaders, and learn from their experience, learn what they're working on, learn what the best practices are and what the trends are, and then how that applies to people's daily lives.
Yeah, amazing. And we all get to listen to it as well, which is awesome, because we can all go on, hear that as well, which is the fantastic thing about podcasts. So yeah, I love your podcast, and I just urge everyone to subscribe to that as well, because there's so much great content on there. So major props to you on that. So that's we're chatting for like 10 minutes and we've just done the bio. So we're going to get into some of the other stuff as well. So I guess I've got loads of questions for you as sort of an athlete in the space. Would you call yourself an athlete activist, or do you just feel like you are a sort of athlete with a focus on sustainability?
Yeah, I feel like the titles get kind of messy. I'd say advocate, I guess.
Yes.
Activist, I feel like, has a negative connotation to it, but yeah, I'd say athlete
advocate for the environment. Brilliant. So in terms of that, my first question that I just want to chat to you about is sort of you've obviously got this platform as an athlete, which is incredible, which you're using in such a positive way, which is awesome. But I think when we think about sport and athletes, especially as it intersects with climate change, in our case, and sustainability, when we think about the impact of climate change on sports, a lot of the time equate that with athletes. So whether it's, at the time of recording today, the Australian Open's just finished, the Beijing Winter Games are about to start. And when we think about climate change impacts on those, we think about maybe athletes suffering with extreme heat conditions or the bushfire smoke that, happened at the AO last year. And you have a lot in California or in Beijing. Yes, we think about the fact that that's taking place somewhere where there isn't natural snow, and there's the environmental impact of the fact they're having to rely on artificial snow. But actually, again, the implication is, the risk to athletes of competing in those conditions, and artificial snow being slightly different to perhaps, snow that they've trained on, etc. So in terms of your position as an athlete, both as an advocate for the effort, do you also feel a bit of a duty to athletes as well in terms of this, about actually, as sport continues, as we see these climate crisis impacts, it is a lot of professional athletes that are going to be adversely affected by this, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, thankfully for beach volleyball, it's more insulated compared to, Winter Olympics. I can only imagine growing up your whole life training for 10, 20 years to compete in the Olympics, and then you're competing on artificial snow, which is significantly different than, fresh powder. So I think there's the safety component where, obviously, in terms of Winter Olympics, it's more dangerous competing on artificial snow. Lots of sports, like you said, are impacted through wildfires and tough air quality conditions, and then also the heat. We definitely experienced that in professional beach volleyball. A lot of tournaments the last few years, we've had to add in longer timeouts, breaks between sets, because, it's getting into 90, 100 degrees. But I also think it also applies to like kind of obviously longevity of sport. Protect Our Winters is obviously very involved in this. If there's no snow, winter sports starts to disappear. Seasons get shorter. The economics of mountains and resorts are greatly affected. But I think professional athletes, it definitely affects us, and it changes the way that we compete. and our performance, but we're also very well prepared. Versus if you look at your youth participants, those are the people that are greatly affected. And that can be a major turnoff. If someone has a poor experience, they may not want to participate and keep going. They may not follow the sport as much. So I think it could greatly affect the future of sports in the way that youth participate and also follow and engage with it, which basically affects the economics of sport.
Yeah, that's an incredibly important point as well. I remember reading a study, maybe a year ago about high school sports in the US and the rise of these extreme heat days, especially in certain parts of the US. And actually, younger people's physiology isn't set up to deal with extreme weather. Before you're an adult, your physiology isn't complete, if you like. It's still in progress. Exactly. So dealing with those extreme heat conditions can have really, really, horrendous impacts. And as you said, you think of that in terms of, well, isn't that awful for those people's health at that time? That's, incredible, and hopefully they're fine. But then also, as you said, if they are looking towards a professional career, there is that. I've never really thought about it in that way before, but it's a really important point of kind of like, am I going to carry on having to train in these conditions and perhaps impact my long-term health? Or shall I go for a slightly easier option of another job over here, another career? So it's a really important point about the next generation, isn't it?
Yeah, and the fan experience too. I spend the off seasons training and competing in Brazil, and there it's insane how hot and humid it is. And they have to build structures over part of the fans, over the stadium for the fans. If you look during the middle of the day, there's no one in the sun. They only have certain areas shaded. So it affects participation, viewership. I'm sure that also affects engagement and sponsors. So yeah, I think it's a pretty wicked problem. So it definitely needs to be top of mind.
Yeah, definitely. And do you feel this might be just a question you're like, Claire, I don't know, because I don't know if I know, but do you feel as though tournament organisers, et cetera, are taking it as seriously as it should do? You mentioned the extra breaks and the shade cover and stuff like that. Do you think that's enough, or do you think more needs to be done?
Yeah, I think it varies sport to sport quite a bit. In beach volleyball, it's definitely top of mind and people are aware, the organizers, but it also affects, the run of tournament. If you have only so much time in the day to get all these matches in, and you add on that extra 30, 40 minutes to each match, that affects how the tournaments run and planning and all the rest. So
yeah, it's a lot. And I think I speak to so many athletes about this, and I've heard of so many athletes being affected. And actually, at a couple of our previous events, we had Amy Steele speak, who's an Australian netballer, and her career was cut short because she had heat stroke. But as we know, heat stroke isn't just feeling a bit warm. It's, your body starts shutting down, etc. And it essentially ended her career. And Amy speaks really frequently about this and very eloquently about her message on that. But I think in the conversations with her, it does become very clear that actually going forward, I think there's going to be such a big duty of care on event organisers to take care of athletes and make sure they are going the extra mile on that. Because, I'm no insurance expert, but what's the implication of making, athletes compete in certain conditions that maybe affects their long-term health? It's maybe not right now, maybe it's 10 years from now, maybe it's 50 years from now, I don't know, but it's hard to see a situation where that duty of care doesn't have to be increased based on the conditions, and that there would be impacts based on that further along the line if it isn't done. And I think that's something sports organisers, especially that are organising events in these sort of temperatures, need to start considering more, for sure, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So there's loads on that kind of athlete side, but I also think what's really interesting about what you talk about in the work is like the sponsorship side, because a lot of athletes who are pro athletes still have to fundraise, don't they, for being able to do what they love through sponsorship, etc. Some people who listen to this podcast might be very across that, and others might not. So can you just explain, you're a pro athlete, how it works for you in terms of fundraising and being able to continue being a pro athlete, and then also once hopefully you can explain that and we can understand it, then the next part of that, which is how you can start working with positive brands or organizations that sort of fit your ethos.
Yeah, 100%. So I feel like sponsorship has somewhat of a negative connotation to it. It's kind of like a dirty word in some ways, but sponsorship is what makes sports happen. Without sponsorship, the Olympics wouldn't exist. So it's definitely necessary. And especially for volleyball, which is kind of like a tier 2 sport, people aren't getting $1 million contracts and have lofty 401ks sitting around waiting for them in retirement. You have to be able to perform as an athlete, do well in tournaments, and then also work with sponsors to subsidized costs of travel and training and coaches and all the rest. Throughout my career, I've done sponsorship kind of every which way. And in the last 2 years, like I said, I started focusing on brands that take transparent impact. So they're B Corp, 1% for the planet, or climate neutral. And we're mission aligned. We share the same values. We're both trying to have an impact through their business and through my platform and training and competing as an athlete. And it's just nice. I find brands that I actually love, that I want to talk about to my friends and family. I want to help tell their story. I want to post about. And I found that it just goes so much better when you guys share the same values. They don't ask about, none of my sponsors ask about like tournament finishes like other ones would. I don't have to post about some lame protein powder or some discount code here or there. It's like
really
no,
natural.
What do you guys have coming up? It's just easy. It's seamless. So finding products that I love that have a tangible impact. So I work with Fair Harbor, which makes board shorts and beachwear out of upcycled plastic water bottles, and they've upcycled, I think they've crossed 15 million now, which is kind of wild. And then Mir, which is a B Corp, 1% for the planet, and climate neutral certified water bottle company. And on the bottom of every single product they make is a giving code. So you can scan the QR code and it shows which nonprofit project that your purchase is supporting. So it's just finding these products and brands that are taking transparent action that you genuinely like, and then helping them tell their story. So I never feel like, oh, great, I have to post again. It's like, no, what's going on? What project, what launch, what campaign do they have going on? And then how can I help support it? Because they're just cool companies that I genuinely like.
That's amazing when it's such a natural fit. But do you think that because you speak out more about the environment and the impact side, that it's easier to start those conversations with sponsors? If there was a athlete who was like, I really want to get into this, but I don't currently feel as though there's sponsorship available to me from those organizations, do you think it's important to get your voice out there first before having those conversations for that alignment? Or do you think it's still possible to access that sort of more ethical money, or something that's a little bit more aligned with brand? If you're not at the moment, perhaps some athletes might be listening who aren't super vocal on impact or aren't super vocal on climate, but they want to move the needle on this. How do you feel in terms of the possibilities around that and the sort of money that's washing about out there for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously easier if you've been at it for a while and you built that into your social media following and whatnot. But I've been interested in this for basically since high school. And I didn't really start posting about it for the last few years. And I was just nervous, like as an athlete, we obviously have to travel a lot. So our carbon footprint is larger than the average person's. And there's a danger of being called out as a hypocrite. But I think there's like actions that you can take, like offsetting your carbon footprint, looking at your travel, trying to minimize it where possible. So yeah, I think being a professional athlete, it opens a lot of doors, even if you haven't spoken out about it, even if you're not super well versed in it, you're just starting to explore and figure out what your impact is and what you can do about it. I think going to a brand and saying that you're interested in working with them because they have third-party certifications, because they're taking transparent impact, that opens a lot of doors. And obviously, if you have been at it for a little while and you have experience with it, that makes it easier. But I think just coming at it from a genuine place of curiosity and passion opens a lot of doors.
Yeah. And it's amazing. And I think it's a testament in terms of when you are vocal about these efforts, and then the positive sponsorship can come. Because I know, again, we've spoken to other athletes and they've spoken on the summit before, where they found it more difficult to find these ethical brands that they can align with. And then they have different journeys around that. But as you said, when you start speaking out about it, I think it's probably more likely that they come to you. And just as an actor, please carry on.
Yeah, well, it's also difficult to take that first plunge. And we were talking before a little bit. Yeah. I've been interested in this, reading books. I went back to school to UCLA to get certificates of sustainability and kind of dive into the details more. And it's not easy to talk about. Our mutual friend, Maddie Orr, did a study, and it was really interesting. She surveyed, I think, a couple hundred athletes and about the barriers of acting on climate and speaking out on it. And everyone just rang true. And those are the same ones that I hit. And I don't know enough about this. So not feeling you're not an expert. So you're worried about getting called out on, coming off as a hypocrite because athletes do have to travel for their sport. They do have larger footprints. And then where do you even begin? It's such a big, broad, overwhelming topic in a lot of ways. But I think just getting started, figuring out, okay, what is my impact? How does my travel affect it? What can I do about it? Can I offset it? What is my diet? Can I shift towards plant-based? Can I make small changes that help my performance and lower my carbon footprint? And then taking small actions individually to kind of give yourself ground to stand on and begin using your platform. Because nobody's perfect. That's the one thing that I've kind of realized is one person's individual carbon footprint isn't going to destroy the world. No one's going to destroy or save the world, but small little changes can really add up.
Yeah, absolutely. In spite of what people on the internet, on social media want us to think, no people are perfect. No people are perfect. And I think, again, this is an area I think in terms of discussions, I struggle with a bit as well, because we get called out. We recently launched sport positive leagues for the Premier League, and the response has been really, really positive, but there's always little stuff, and that's the stuff that sticks in your brain, isn't it, Jeremy? The negative stuff stays with us. You need like 100 positive and then one negative, you're like, Urgh. But again, in that, I see the same responses there that I hear athletes get a lot as well, of like, oh, well, how can you call this football club sustainable when they're taking, flight for training camps and they fly it with inside the UK to games, etc. And to a greater or lesser extent, I agree that in terms of, yes, there is a carbon footprint there. And in some cases, I'm sure efforts could be made to reduce that. But also I feel quite defensive about sport as well, in that, corporate business travel is wild. It's just people don't know about it and people don't see it, and it's not in the media. So like, I know, and I'm sure people who've traveled to work and they're never at home. They're constantly on the road, and their carbon footprint is like, they're literally taking 4 flights a week or something to do their job, but they're not athletes. They're not visible. The media aren't interested in them. So sport isn't held to the same sort of mark as other industries. And it's difficult because I don't disagree that we should be working really hard to reduce them. But also that's as you mentioned, before with athletes, you're doing all of this really hard work to use your platform for good. And then you get pulled down for getting a flight somewhere, but you're traveling for your work. You're doing your job to do that. So it's unfair. That's the internet, that's social media. We all have to deal with that. But that, I think, how frustrating is that for you in terms of all this positive work you're doing? And then the fact that as a human being and an individual and someone who's working, of course, you're going to have a carbon footprint and you have to fly to tournaments, etc., because that's the mode of transport, if you're traveling across the globe, that we have to use right now.
Yeah, exactly. Sport is more visible. So you definitely do. And like you said, those 1 or 2 negative comments are like, they stick with you so much more than all the positive feedback, which is it's brutal. But I think it's just literally trying to understand like what is your impact? What can you do about it? Can you measure and offset your carbon footprint? What can you do? And nobody's perfect. And especially as an athlete, like you don't have time to be a climate scientist. You don't have time to be an expert, but you can do small steps to try and have ground to stand on, and then start a conversation with those people. Like I've gotten some DMs about it, and I'm like, okay, here's what I'm doing. Offset my carbon footprint. I'm working with the EVP to create a climate action plan. I'm working with sponsors around sustainability. What else can I do? Do you have any suggestions? And just be honest. Like, this is where I'm coming from. I feel like transparency and honesty is the best way forward. And like what you were saying with the Premier League, it's incredible what you've done to get these clubs across the league to disclose on their impacts. And sure, nobody's perfect, but just to get them to take that first step and look at their baselines and look at where they stand and disclose on that, it's absolutely wild what you've accomplished. I don't know how you've done that.
It's taken a while, but I think, again, there's so much positive stuff there, but I think we all have to, I mean, you much more so as a visible public figure, but I think all of us have to have thicker skins, because whenever you're trying to move the needle on things, there's always going to be people who want things to stay the same. They don't want athletes to talk about anything. They want athletes to stay in their lane. They want to hear about the sport. They want to escape from their lives. They just want to go and see that person. But sport has always been a tool for change, hasn't it?
Yeah. And I think the other piece of it too is like finding where your points of leverage are. So like going back to like your individual carbon footprint, if you take a well-known athlete like Lewis Hamilton, obviously he has a massive carbon footprint. He's a professional Formula One driver. He flies all over the world. But if he never raced again, if he never flew again, if you never ate another piece of meat, that would have a relatively small impact globally. But when he sends one post and it gets millions and millions of likes, and he's talking about important issues, when he's highlighting, Formula E and the work they're doing, that has a huge impact. And same thing with the Premier League's teams that you're working with. When they start to make small changes at the stadiums, in their clubhouse with their athletes, it's just so much more visible. So there's the downside of it. You can be called a hypocrite and people will take their shots, but that's smaller overall. But making those small changes, and then how visible and how far they can go from, fans, sponsors, athletes, there's just a big opportunity there.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. And I think it's the most important job is often the hardest. And I think with athletes do have this incredible platform, because generally when people are interested in sport, they love the sport, obviously, but it's the people and the individuals that capture their imagination and who they follow and who they love. So, for you, I'm sure like the AVB Tour has a lot of followers there, etc., and they hear about what's going on, but a lot of the combined athletes probably have much more following and much more impact in terms of their reach and that human connection. So in terms of that and the difficult sort of road for athletes on this journey, there's so many organizations out there and more popping up about supporting athletes in this journey. But for you, as someone who's quite far along this road actually, but still, continually evolving and pushing things forward, what kind of support would you welcome in terms of this journey for athletes, in terms of, as you said, the challenges that report that Maddie did flagged about, not feeling like an expert in this, feeling like we're being called a hypocrite, those sorts of things. What kind of tools do you think are helpful for athletes to be able to support, as far as possible, them to take this platform and take the plunge to talk out more about this?
Yeah. Like I said, it's really daunting to kind of dive in and start to speak about it publicly, or even just begin to research, but there are great organizations, You have Hannah Mills and Melissa Wilson doing the work that they're doing with the Big Plastic Pledge and Athletes of the World. I'm on the board of Players for the Planet, which was founded by Chris Dickerson, started in baseball, but now it's branching out, basically bringing all these athletes together and trying to create change through their platforms with their leagues, their teams, their sponsors. Eco Athletes is also doing that as well. Yeah. So there are resources. And again, I don't think it's not about being perfect. Nobody has all the answers. It's just finding what's the next best step. And it's you'll do some things right and some things wrong, but you'll learn and kind of iterate from there. Yeah. So just understanding that you're starting from somewhere and trying to take that next best step.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's obviously definitely a role, isn't there, for education and community and stuff, and trying to support and uplift the efforts. But I think, as you mentioned before, it has to feel credible, and it has to feel authentic to that individual athlete. So whilst athletes can receive, hopefully, and more of these organizations are appearing to support that education effort, etc., and try and increase that comfort level, ultimately it's the individual's journey, isn't it, about what they want to speak out about and what they feel passionately about and what feels authentic to them.
And I think it's about 100%. And you don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to be active on every single issue. Find what actually resonates with you. There's a Venn diagram from How to Save the Planet, basically like trying to figure out the podcast, How to Save the Planet, and Dr. Ayanna Johnson, I believe. It's like, what are you good at? What's the work that needs doing? And obviously in climate and social issues, that's a broad range. And then what brings you joy? So I geek out on, third-party certifications. So for me, it's really fun to get to work with these brands that are B Corp, 1% and climate neutral. And then also, I've started to realize how fans and athletes want that opportunity to get involved. People don't know where to begin. I did the first beach cleanups with AVP a few years ago, and I could only do 2 or 3 because of scheduling. And people the whole summer were like, "Oh, it's so cool. Where can I get involved? What can I do? Can I donate? Can I come to the next one?" People want that in-person opportunity to get their hands dirty and feel like they're part of the solution. So, yeah.
And we see a lot, I've seen a few of that as well in motorsport and in football and other sports where like that becomes, super attractive as a fan if an athlete is doing it with you. I think, we can all go out and do stuff in our own communities and that's brilliant, but how cool to go and do something good for the planet whilst you're like hanging out and an athlete who you really admire is doing it with you. So I think that touch point as well is brilliant. So that's those beach cleans and different things, I think are really simple, but it's incredibly effective.
Yeah, I think, people just want, especially after the last 2 years of COVID, people want that sense of community, and especially if you can do it in person. And
that's amazing. Is there athletes in this space, like obviously you've mentioned Chris Dickerson there, that you're seeing who you feel as though like they're really, I love what they're doing, and they've, they're really starting to talk out more about this, that people should look out for? You've mentioned some already, but is there anyone else who springs to mind?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jeremy Jones, who founded, he's an insane snowboarder, and he founded Protect Our Winters, and they're probably one of the most well-organized, and they really do a great job of providing resources and building out campaigns for athletes because it's a lot for an athlete to like build out your own campaign, or, you're focused on your training and your craft and competing. But they do a great job of building out campaigns with a bunch of nonprofit partners, with sponsors, and then helping the athletes plug into it. So he's obviously a leader. And then some of the better known athletes, like you mentioned, Lewis Hamilton and Naomi Osaka, who, one simple post on Instagram goes so far, but you can tell that it's authentic to who they are. It's not fluff. It's not like a sponsored post. It's what they actually care about.
Yeah. And Protect Our Winters that you mentioned, I think the work that they're doing is so awesome. And I know Laura McCallum, who's the managing director of Protect Our Winters UK, and they did a lot of work. I saw her at COP. And what I love about Protect Our Winters is they're using the power of people who are sort of really passionate about the outdoors towards major campaigns that exist already. And I think this is part of the thing with athletes and with sport, actually, more broadly, but certainly the role athletes can play is directing people to what they can do and sort of being a bit of a signpost towards that. And I love Protect Our Winters because Lauren, for example, the campaigns they did in the UK and Europe were around, around moving investment companies away from investing in oil and gas, for example. So rather than sort of saying, let's set up a sport-focused campaigns for people who are interested in sport, they're like, let's use the power of everyone who's passionate about the outdoors to get behind this mainstream campaign that's going to decarbonize our investments or decarbonize. So I think they do that really well. And I think, again, you've touched on a brilliant point of this, whether athletes, feel really passionately or whether it's in different areas that they care about, this ability to signpost to incredible organizations or incredible things that are happening that people can then find out more.
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of the things I did kind of stumbled into early on, is like these nonprofits don't have the resources to produce quality videos and invest in their marketing and get like pay celebrity ambassadors or athletes. But I became an ambassador for Probably for the Oceans and for Stewardship Council, and it's literally just sharing their posts, sharing their campaigns, and it's not that heavy of a lift to point people in the right direction and share resources and solutions and organizations that are doing good work. Yeah. So that's like a very simple way. We're talking about kind of athletes taking that first step. I think that's a really simple way. Find the nonprofits and organizations and campaigns that align with what you're interested in and passionate about, and then support them on social media, or if you can, attend their events and volunteer or donate. Like, just get behind a nonprofit that's already doing the good work. You don't need to start from ground zero.
Yeah. And again, as you said, a really accessible start point for athletes who are thinking, I really care about this stuff, but I'm not ready yet to start being super vocal or take a stand. It's you're not saying, this is me, here's my whole story. You're saying, here's a great organization, you should check them out. That's easy. Exactly. Again, part of this conversation is about athletes, but it's also about organizations that athletes work with, whether it's governing bodies, federations, etc. Because I think there's this interesting shift where a lot of athletes now are driving this work inside the organizations, the federations, the tournaments, the tours, because they've got wind of things. And then they think, hang on, okay, I'm quite passionate about this. Yeah. What's our organization doing about it now? We've seen that across a few different sports. And I think, you're obviously doing a lot of work with the AVP tour now around this as well. So that's, again, just another great thing athletes can do internally without thinking even external comms. Internal comms, like what are the people who we work with doing and the organizations we work with doing?
Yeah, and a lot of the times, like the people that run the organizations or federations, like they're not climate experts. They also don't really know where to begin. So
Yeah.
I basically came to the AVP a little while back and was like, this is amazing. Waste Management does great work. They work with the Phoenix Open, they work with Indy 500, NASCAR, like all these massive sports organizations. And I think this would not only be good for the environment and our community and the athletes and all the other players, but would also drive business results. And they were super receptive to it. And it's just interesting when you think about all the different stakeholders within sport, governing bodies, leagues, teams, athletes, sponsors, fans. Athletes kind of sit in the middle of it and have these points of leverage where they have a direct line of communication with fans. Fans are following athletes more than they're following the leagues or teams. They have a direct line of communication with sponsors. They have it with the other athletes and or on their teams, the leagues. So like you said, athletes taking action. And even if they're not experts, but just saying, this is important to me. Can we look at this? These are organizations doing great work. Can we partner with them and support their initiatives? Yeah. They seem to, there's still a lot of untapped opportunity there.
Yeah, ask the question. That's it, isn't it? Ask the question. What are we doing?
You don't have to have all the answers, but just ask the question and point people in the right direction.
Tell me, so we're at the start of the year now. So what are you excited about for 2022? So both in regard to your work, but also the industry and the movement around sport and impact for this year. What's on the radar of things that you're excited about?
Yeah, I guess broadly, sustainability in sports is just becoming more mainstream. Yeah. I think it's when people see reusable cups at stadiums or, solar panels or vegan options at events and games, it's kind of becoming the norm. So it's not a heavy lift anymore. You're seeing widespread adoption across all sports, which is amazing. More and more athletes are speaking out. And I guess just kind of personally in my world of beach volleyball, the AVP Climate Action Plan working with Waste Management, we're going to have a heavy focus on the Manhattan Beach Open, which is kind of our Wimbledon or our Super Bowl in the world of volleyball. Yeah. So we're going to be building out a lot of programs there and then spreading those to the other events. And yeah, I'm just excited to get back into hopefully a more normal year of training and competing and getting back to see everyone in the beach volleyball community in person.
Nice. It's going to be a good year. We're so hopeful for 2022 after the last couple of years, aren't we? Exactly. And tell me, I saw you posted as well recently about the research you're doing for your own podcast and sort of you thinking about yourself and thinking about asking your people coming on the podcast about an idea you learned from your parents or an idea you'd like to pass on for your kids, which I thought was really interesting. Tell me about your thoughts around that and what you think about in terms of what you learned from your parents and what you're passing on to the kids.
Yeah. That's one of the things talking about, like, kind of using your platform is I just like sharing the kind of ideas that I'm kind of pondering myself. And the podcast has been a really fun opportunity to talk to people like yourself and other people who are further along in this work and just get to talk shop. And that was an idea I think that was from a few weeks ago, kind of the turn of the year, thinking about, the year ahead. And I just love hearing people's experiences and kind of passing on lessons or ideas. And I guess a couple that come to mind are from my dad. He loves speaking in cliches. Nice. Everything was just like off a Hallmark card kind of. It was one of those things that was so embarrassing when I was younger, but just come to love it now. And he had a number. He would just keep on keeping on. Just show up every day and do the best you can. And I feel like that's just has very, very relevant the last 2 years. And I think it's really relevant to the work we're doing. Just put the best, what's the next best step and get a little bit better each day and try and bring more people along.
Yeah, I love that because it is, isn't it? I think that's why I wanted to mention it when I saw it, because I thought it's obviously it's really human and it's really personal, but also that kind of things you learned from your parents or you would pass on to your kids has the underlying element of that is legacy and is sustainability, basically, isn't it? It's something that's passed on to you that you pass on, and that idea of keep on keeping on and just, turn up and that, all of that is what we need to do in this line of work, because it isn't like it's hard. It's really difficult, especially every stakeholder in that you're working with and everyone isn't on board, and you're constantly, a lot of the time it's not just super easy and straightforward. So that persistence, the resilience, and that sort of messaging, whilst it's, as you said, like cliches from your dad, actually it's legacy, it's sustainability, and it's really, really good advice for what we're doing.
It seems like there's not much change, and then it kind of comes all at once. Like I've been trying to get this EVP climate action plan off the ground for quite some time, and there's plenty of ups and downs, and it felt like maybe it was going to happen. Now it's finally here, so I'm really, really excited. And I imagine it's kind of similar for what you've done with Sport Positive Leagues, like trying to get that off the ground and building out Sport Positive Summit, to take a look back a few years ago where things were and where they are today. It's just, it happens a lot slower day to day, but a lot faster over longer time periods.
Yeah, and it's nice to have these chats, because a lot of the time we don't see the wood from the trees, and you're just, every year I'm like, this is kind of a tipping point. I really think like things have moved on. And then every year it's like the same as you said. I feel like in the last couple of years, for sure, there's been this shift into mainstream media, which has got, I think, for a number of different reasons. But that, again, some people have been working in this for 20 years, other people a decade, others are just coming to it, but it doesn't matter, because all of that is pushing towards the main cause and everyone, this sort of mass movement that everyone's now a part of. And I think it's been so amazing to chat to you today, because I think, every stakeholder is important, but I think athletes hold a very special place in this movement of being able to move the needle in society. I think decision makers within sport, the business of sport, are crucial to get that buy-in, to drive the change and to make stuff happen, to invest in the right places and bring the strategies and the policies in. But actually the reason that sport's so important is that microphone to the world, isn't it? And actually, when we get our own house in order, being able to use that platform to inspire people and drive change across communities. So that's why I think it's so amazing to chat to people like yourself who are doing it, because athletes are just, for me, like the central linchpin of that, of getting it out to society, driving societal changes. And that's why it's so amazing to chat to you about the work that's happening.
Well, it could literally, I've learned so much from attending the Sport Positive Summit, and without people like you, Maddie Orr, Sport Ecology Group, Lee, I think I connected with Maddie Orr 2 years ago through a LinkedIn cold message, and she's just so receptive. I told her this is kind of where I'm starting. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm really excited about this, and that. And she's like, let me connect you with all these people. So I feel like the work that you are doing is vital to helping athletes kind of take that first step and then work towards more systemic change within sport and getting leagues and teams on board. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing.
Oh, you're so kind. I think is another, just a great point around, sustainability and impact in sport. I think it isn't a massive community, actually, in terms of the people. You'll end up being introduced to the same, when you're starting off, you'll end up getting introduced to the same person 12 times, because it's not a massive community. But I think everyone is so receptive and supportive around this. So I think, the message is always, if people are passionate about it, get in touch and get involved with the community. So just the last question I want to ask you, just to finish off, which I'm going to keep as a sort of a thread through the Climate of Sport podcast. Not like a top tip, but maybe it's what you've learned, a nugget of wisdom that you can share, or something you wish you'd known, years ago when you started out, or a pet peeve that's, I really wish we could get our head around this. So anything in that ilk of just a takeaway for people, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I guess I had been at it for quite a number of years, trying to learn and research and all this, and that kind of slowed me down from taking action. But I think just the idea of getting your own house in order first is huge. And the 3 questions that helped me a lot is, what's my impact? What can I do about it? And how can I help scale positive outcomes and solutions? So figure out what your impact is, figure out what you can do about it individually, and then who you can partner with to do it. And then figure out who else is doing great work and how you can bring other people along for the ride.
Amazing. Such great advice to finish with. And thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. And that was Jeremy Casebeer.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Climate of Sport podcast. Please like and subscribe and get in touch if you want to share information about the work that you're doing, if you want to appear as a guest or you want to recommend guests, or you just have ideas of conversations you'd like us to have. You can get in touch by emailing info@sportpositivesummit.com.